Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters in Islam, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow His infinite mercy and blessings upon all of you. Today we're gathered to continue discussing the great hadith of Zara, the hadith which Aisha radiallahu anha narrates, the narratives of 11 women and their dealings with their husbands and their description of their husbands. And this hadith contains many benefits in regarding spousal relations, how husbands and wives should deal with each other in the household. And we concluded our last lecture with the fourth woman's narrative, and today we're going to talk about the fifth woman's narrative. So the fifth woman, who was describing her husband, she described her husband and she said, "Zawji in dakhala fahad wa in kharaja asad wa la yas'alu amma ahad." So the fifth woman, she said, when my husband enters the house, he's like a leopard, and if he goes out, he's like a lion. And don't ask about what happens in the house. So here the fifth woman is resembling her husband with a leopard. And leopards have many different traits and characteristics. And the scholars have differed in regards to their interpretation of what this woman said here. Did she mean to praise her husband, or did she mean to dispraise her husband? So what was she intending by describing her husband as a leopard? So this is from the eloquence of the Arabic language and also the eloquence of the Arabs, and particularly this woman, as she was describing her husband in a way that can be interpreted in two opposite ways. It could be in praising her husband or dispraising her husband. But the scholars who mentioned that she was praising her husband by resembling him with a leopard said that just how a leopard is heedless sometimes to the things which are going on around him, this is how her husband is or was when he would enter the house. He doesn't nitpick and pay attention to every little and small detail in the house. And also the scholars said that normally leopards are kind and gentle animals. They are patient, they are pardoning, and they are overlooking, just like her husband was with her. And leopards are also described with having some sort of modesty and shyness, and they are known to be animals that don't like to create too much mischief. And also the leopard is known for its strength and its ability to hunt and its ability to feed its family and bring home provisions. So if what she intended was praising her husband by resembling him to a leopard in these traits, then she has praised her husband in a very highly manner, and said that her husband is one who takes care of her and brings home provisions for her and her children. As for the scholars who say that she may have been dispraising her husband, then if we think about some of the negative traits of a leopard, which are the most apparent, is number one, that it sleeps a lot, and it is sometimes considered to be lazy. So much so that the Arabs even have an expression they use to describe someone who sleeps a lot when they say fulan anwamu min al-fahd, that person sleeps more than a leopard. So the Arabs used to dispraise someone who sleeps a lot and someone who is lazy. And also the leopard has within it some ferocity. It can be ferocious and violent at times and attack other animals. And because of its strength and its agility and speed, it can kind of be aggressive towards other creatures. So if she intended this, then she meant to describe her husband as someone who sleeps a lot, someone who does not fulfill all of his responsibilities, and doesn't adequately take care of his wife's needs. And because of his strength and ferocity, he sometimes deals with her harshly. But however, after observing her entire statement, it is what the scholars the majority of the scholars have said is that she is praising her husband, and she resembled her husband to a leopard here out of praise and love and respect and honor for her husband. And it can also be understood from her speech that she was praising her husband by resembling him to a leopard when she followed what she said about him with another statement resembling her husband to a lion. When she said, وَإِنْ خَرَجَ أَسَدٍ, and if he goes out, if he leaves the house, then he becomes like a very magnificent or a very beautiful lion, okay, or a very brave or courageous lion. And lions are known to be the kings of the jungle. And this is also from the eloquence of the Arabs in the Arabic language and what they call in the art of balagha al-ihtiras. Al-ihtiras. When someone says something that can be understood in two contradictory ways, then it is followed up with more precise speech to clarify what the intention really was. So in the beginning, she said he was like a fahad, he was like a leopard, but then she went on to explain it more. وَإِنْ خَرَجَ أَسَدٍ, that he was like a lion, which actually gave more explanation to the way she felt in regards to her husband. So she described her husband here as a lion, so that no one would think that she was describing her husband with the negative traits of the leopard. So she wanted to emphasize the point that she was praising her husband, as if she is saying to the other women, my husband, when he is with me, he is very easy, he is very pardoning, and he is very gentle with me and with our children. And his taghaful, his intentionally ignoring things, is not because of his weakness or heedlessness, rather it is because of his great understanding and high intellect. Rather, he is magnificent lion who is brave, courageous, and defends us all the time. So her resembling her husband to a lion also tells us that her husband was very courageous. He was bold, he was outspoken and patient with other people. And he is no one to be reckoned with because of his strength, power, and might, in the fear that other people may have of him. So in this statement, this woman wanted to clarify the strength and might and respect that her husband has with other individuals. So she also used two short words to describe the great traits and characteristics within her husband, that if we were to try to enumerate all of them, we would be here for days and have numerous lectures. And they also rhyme together and have greatly deep, intensive, or extensive meanings, right? Fahad wa Asad, they both rhyme. And this is also from the eloquence of the Arabs of that time and also the Arabic language. And also with her selection of short words with opposite meanings, right? وَإِنْ خَرَجَ وَإِنْ دَخَلَ. She used the word fahad and asad, which rhyme, and also kharaj wa dakha. And this shows us that she was attentive of how her husband acts outside of the house, as well as how he acts inside the house. Inside the house, he was easy, he was pardoning, overlooking, and gentle as a leopard. And outside the house, he was serious, strong, mighty, powerful, brave, courageous, and protective. And then she finally goes on to describe her husband with وَلَا يَسْأَلُ عَمَّا أَهَدٍ. And don't ask about what he does in the house. So here she's telling the other women how generous, how kind, and gentle her husband is, that he is far from being stingy. He overlooks the negative traits of his wife and intentionally ignores her small mistakes and shortcomings. He doesn't count every penny that his wife spends, or doesn't look at the type of food that she buys, and doesn't inquire about where the money has gone that he's given her, because of his generosity and extreme graciousness. So basically, this woman, she could have been describing him as someone who intentionally ignores some things when he comes home, and this is a very praiseworthy and important trait that all men should learn. As for the man who follows everything, big and small, that happens in his house, or is someone who is very difficult to get along with, right, then this is very difficult for someone to live in a household such as this. So the wise man, the wise husband, the wise father will learn to practice what we know in Arabic to be a taghaful. A taghaful, which is to intentionally ignore things. Okay? Intentionally ignore things that go on around you. You have knowledge of what is going on, You have knowledge that your wife did this, or your child did this, or your son did this, or your daughter did this, but you intentionally ignore things which are not really major things to be focused on, as long as they don't fall into acts of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is said that the intellectual, okay, the one who is truly strong-minded and is intellectual, is the one who is aware of everything but intentionally ignores the smaller things. And the importance of a taghaful in the house, okay, and for leaders and for fathers and mothers, okay, it is something very important that we should all try to learn as Muslims. And Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, he said, "Tis'atu ash'ar husnu khuluq fi taghaful." He said 9/10 of good manners and fine etiquettes is in taghaful, is in intentionally ignoring the worldly shortcomings and mistakes that other individuals may have. And Al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, from the great tabi'een, he said, "Ma zala taghaful min fi'l al-kiram." He said, at-taghaful, intentionally ignoring some things, is from the manners and etiquettes of the most generous people. And as Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahimahullah, he said, "Al-mu'minu yatlubu al-ma'adhir wal-munafiqu yatlubu al-zallat." That the believer, the true believer, he always looks for mistakes. Or he always, excuse me, the true believer, he always looks for excuses. He always looks for excuses for his brothers and sisters, and especially his family members. And the hypocrite always looks for and searches for mistakes and shortcomings and focuses on the shortcomings and mistakes of individuals. So at-taghaful, brothers and sisters, is a behavior that is used by the wise. And it is a type of character and etiquette that true intellectuals try to adorn themselves with and practice regularly. And at-taghaful is from the finest manners and etiquettes that one can adorn oneself with. So the one who practices taghaful knows and sees other people's mistakes and shortcomings, and they have the ability to reprimand them, but they overlook them and intentionally ignore them to keep good relations with other people. And the type of taghaful that we intend here, okay, that husbands should have, that wives should have, that fathers should have towards their children sometimes, is the taghaful, the type of overlooking and intentionally ignoring mistakes that concern people and their personal lives. The type of things that don't have anything to do with Allah's rights over us. Of course, we should never overlook something for someone for not fulfilling their rights with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as praying, fasting, wearing hijab, paying zakat, or making hajj. These things we can never overlook. Rather, we should remind each other with gentleness, kindness, and fine preaching. So as we said, at-taghaful, it means to overlook and intentionally ignore other people's faults, mistakes, and mishaps in their worldly affairs. And along with not blaming or reproaching others, okay? So not blaming people or putting them on the spot or pulling their card constantly is from the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in teaching his family and his companions and bringing about reconciliation. And it occurred in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he confided a secret to his wife Hafsa. He told her something that he didn't want anyone else to know. But unfortunately, Hafsa, she told another one of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was Aisha. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that Hafsa had told their secret to Aisha. So when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ knew that Hafsa had shared their secret, he only shared with her part of what he knew. And he didn't blame her. He didn't reproach her, nor did he act ill or mean to her. Rather, he overlooked her mistake and intentionally ignored it. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions in the Quran, وَإِذْ أَصَرَّ النَّبِيُّ إِلَى بَعْضِ أَزْوَاجِهِ حَدِيثًا فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَتْ بِهِ وَأَظْهَرَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ أَرَّفَ بَعْضَهُ وَأَعْرَضَ عَنْ بَعْضٍ فلما نبأها به قالت من أنبأك هذا قال نبأني العليم الخبير. And remember, Allah says in the Quran, and remember when the Prophet confided to one of his wives a statement, and when she informed another one of his wives of it, and Allah showed it to him, showed it to the messenger, he made known part of it and ignored a part. And when he informed her about it, she said, who told you this? Then the Prophet Muhammad he said, indeed I was informed by the all-knowing, the all-acquainted with everything, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the scholars of tafsir, they say about this verse that the Prophet Muhammad didn't inform Hafsa of everything that Allah had told him about Hafsa, exposing their secret out of his fine character and manners and not wanting to blame his wife and reproach her for her mistake. And there is some great poetry which the Arabs memorize, which says, إِذَا كُنْتَ فِي كُلِّ الْأُمُورِ مُعَاتِبًا. If you are someone who always blames other people for things, خَلِيلَكَ لَمْ تَلْقَ الَّذِي تُعَاقِبُ. Any friend that you meet, any individual that you meet will never be free from your blame. فَعِشْ وَاحِدًا أَوْ صِلْ أَخَاكَ فَإِنَّهُ. Live alone without any friends, or be forgiving and pardoning with them. مُقَارِفُ ذَنْبٍ مَرَّةً وَمُجَانِبُ. So, everyone commits sins sometimes, and they avoid sins at other times. إِذَا أَنْتَ لَمْ تَشْرَبْ مِرَارًا عَلَى الْقَذَى. If you've never drank from a vessel, from a container or a glass that had some specks of dirt in it, ظَمِئْتَ وَأَيُّ النَّاسِ تَصْفُو مُشَارِبُ. Then you would always be thirsty, and whose drinking vessel would always be clean. So these verses of poetry right here, this means that every human being has shortcomings and mistakes. And there is no one who is perfect except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he told us, كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمْ خَطَّاء وَخَيْرُ خَطَّائِينَ التَّوَّابُونَ. That all human beings make mistakes, and the best of those who make mistakes are those who repent. So brothers and sisters, fathers, mothers, spouses, husbands and wives, we have to remind each other that we all have deficiencies, and we all have character faults. Some of us fall into lying, some of us fall into gossiping and backbiting, stealing, and even deceiving others. If someone constantly blames and tries to pick out the petty faults and mistakes of other people, especially his friends and family members, then they will eventually end up living alone without any friends and without any family. And they will taste the bitterness of loneliness. Or he will choose, so someone can either live by themselves and taste the bitterness of loneliness, or they can choose to live with friends and family and other people around them, while knowing that everyone has their mistakes, deficiencies, and shortcomings, and try to overlook the shortcomings that people have in their worldly affairs. So at-taghaful, brothers, overlooking and intentionally ignoring other people's personal mistakes and mishaps, keeps the love and affection between friends and loved ones. So the Muslims must learn how to overlook each other's personal mistakes and shortcomings that are not related to Allah or His Messenger's rights. And at-taghaful, overlooking other people's faults, is from the fine and noble etiquettes of the best, and the finest of behavior and manners that a Muslim can adorn him or herself with. As for the naive, the ignorant, and the heedless, then you find that they don't have this etiquette or behavior with others, nor do they try to learn it or practice it. And this is because of their deficient intellects, their lack of concern for others, and because of their sick souls and their non-Islamic mannerisms. So you find them focusing and nitpicking on every small mistake and mishap that other people have, that other people make, and they make mountains out of molehills. They overreact, and they blow things way out of proportion. They appear to be smart and intelligent by finding the faults of others and blaming them for them, but in all actuality, they will never be the leaders of themselves, nor the leaders of their people. And one of the great righteous predecessors by the name of Bakr ibn Abdullah, he says, if you see someone busying themselves with finding the mistakes of others, while forgetting and being heedless about their own mistakes and shortcomings, then know that the shaitan has deceived them. And it's been narrated in a hadith which Imam Ibn Hibban narrated in his Sahih, and Imam al-Albani authenticated in his Silsilah on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that he says, one of you sees that the Prophet Muhammad he says, one of you sees the speck of dirt in his brother's eye, but doesn't see the big log from a tree in his own eye. And a great poet once said about at-taghaful, about intentionally ignoring other people's worldly mistakes and shortcomings in their worldly affairs. He says, لَيْسَ الْغَبِيُّ بِسَيِّدِ فِي قَوْمِهِ لَيْسَ الْغَبِيُّ بِسَيِّدٍ فِي قَوْمِهِ لَكِنْ سَيِّدَ قَوْمِهِ الْمُتَغَابِ. The heedless individual is not the leader of his people. Rather, the leader of the people is one who acts as though he is heedless and doesn't know what's going on, but in all actuality, he really knows what is going on. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with mercy, with His mercy and wisdom, and adorn us with these fine etiquettes and manners of at-taghaful, which is overlooking and intentionally ignoring other people's mistakes and shortcomings. So one thing we must constantly remind ourselves with, brothers and sisters, is that none of us are free from mistakes. None of us are free from shortcomings and character deficiencies. That we should busy ourselves with focusing and rectifying our own deficiencies and shortcomings before we busy ourselves worrying about other people's faults. And it is impossible for people to be free of mistakes. When we deal with our families and spouses, we need to realize just how we have deficiencies, our wives, our children, and our relatives do as well. And I'm sure that there doesn't pass by a week in our homes except that one of the two spouses feel annoyed, disturbed, or angry about some type of behavior, some type of statement, some type of action that either the husband or the wife or the mother or the father did. So it is not from the character of the Muslim to allow every small disagreement, every small argument, or every small mishap turn into a fight, or into name calling, or swearing, or cursing at their spouses, or sometimes even fighting. Sometimes those with deficient intellects and deficient understanding of the religion of Islam allow verbal disagreements with their spouses to lead to physical altercations and punching and hitting, even over something so petty, so small as the food being too salty, or the food being cold, or the house not being clean, or the clothes not being washed, or because the wife talked back to the husband. And we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from such actions. So because of this, brothers and sisters, it is upon both the husband and the wife to accept the other person the way they are in regards to their worldly affairs, with the deficiencies in character traits that they have, and to overlook and pardon and intentionally ignore things sometimes. I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes, and to choose the right moments to address those deficiencies and mistakes and mishaps, and do not do it in front of other people so that you do not humiliate or embarrass your husband or your wife or your children. And unfortunately, we find many men, they scrutinize about everything and are so picky when it comes to dealing with their wives. And they always have a response to their wives, or always have to have the last word. They open the refrigerator and they yell out, "Why aren't the things in the refrigerator arranged? Why didn't you put the vegetables on top and the fruit on the bottom?" Or they say, "Why is the dinner table dirty? There's crumbs on there. Why isn't the floor vacuumed?" Or, "I gave you $50 yesterday. Where did it go? What did you spend it on?" And he makes their life miserable together. So it is known that the generous and the noble people do not scrutinize or micromanage other people's lives. And also there are women who scrutinize their husbands, always asking their husbands, "What did you mean by that?" Or, "Who was that who called you on the phone?" Or, "Who's this one who messaged you on your phone?" Or, "Why did you come home late? Where were you?" They make mountains out of molehills when dealing with their husbands sometimes. So brothers and sisters in Islam, we need to learn how to practice at-taghaful. We need to learn how to intentionally ignore things sometimes so as to keep good relations with others. And we should not be heedless of what our spouses or children or friends are doing. Rather, we should pay attention, but we need to learn what really deserves to be pointed out and what things could we pardon and overlook, and maybe advise them at another time, or overlook or pardon altogether. Of course, if we see our children or spouses doing something that is prohibited in Islam, or they are negligent in fulfilling their religious obligations, then we would remind them with kindness. But as for the worldly affairs that have no relationship to the deen, no relationship to Islam, then we need to learn to intentionally ignore things sometimes. So the intelligent person, the leader, the manager, the boss of a company should not scrutinize everything big and everything small. And they shouldn't let the people who he's responsible for and deals with on a daily basis know that he knows everything about them. And also the parents should not over-exaggerate if they see some mistakes or mishaps from their children. They should put everything in its proper perspective. And as you know, every household has its ups and downs, has its mistakes and shortcomings, as well as its positive and good things as well. For example, accidentally breaking a glass or a plate or something in the house should not lead to one excessively punishing or spanking one's children. So everyone's household suffers from these types of problems and difficulties in raising children. So intentionally ignoring and pardoning sometimes will keep the problems and disputes at home at a minimum level, and keep everyone in line, and keep the love and affection between the members of the household. And some of the wise people from the past, they used to say, وَجَدْتُ أَكْثَرُ أُمُورِ الدُّنْيَا لَا تَجُوزُ إِلَّا التَّغَافُلُ إِلَّا بِالتَّغَافُلِ. They said that I found that the majority of the affairs of this dunya, the majority of the smooth running of the affairs of the dunya and the situations in this dunya would not run smoothly except with some at-taghaful. So these are just some examples of how we can practice at-taghaful. And it has been narrated that one of the great tabi'een, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, he said, a man will come to me, and this is a great example of taghaful, a great example of how scholars sometimes should deal with their students, or deal with those individuals who are coming to learn or ask about some specific topics. Ata ibn Abi Rabah, who was from the great scholars of the tabi'een, he said, a man will come to me and he will narrate a hadith to me, and I will listen attentively to him as if I have never heard that narration before, and I actually heard it before he was even born. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adorn our hearts and our souls with tawheed, and adorn our limbs with the imitation of Allah's Messenger, and beautify our manners with at-taghaful, with intentionally ignoring and intentionally overlooking other people's shortcomings and mistakes, so that we can maintain good relations with one another. So also, what we benefit from this hadith is from the manners of a good husband. And it is very important and necessary for the husband, if he is the master and head of the household, whom which everyone is obedient to appease, okay? To appease and politically flatter, to use mudara, okay? I guess you could say placating or appeasing or flattery, okay? To use flattery with those under his care, and manage them in their affairs with wisdom and intelligence. So if we think about it, how many problems within the household occur because the man, the husband or the father, does not know how to manage and resolve the issues? Whereas many of the problems that occur inside the house could be easily resolved if the husband would sometimes intentionally ignore things and use flattery and use placating and things like this. Our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ advised us to use wisdom and gentleness with our families, especially our wives. As Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he narrated, as Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he said, whoever believes in Allah and the hereafter, if he witnesses any matter, he should talk in good terms about it or keep quiet. And then he said, act kindly towards women, for a woman is created from a rib, and the most crooked part of the rib is the top. If you attempt to straighten it, you will break it. And if you leave it, its crookedness will remain there. So act kindly towards women. This meaning that within every woman is some type of deficiency, just like in every man there are some type of deficiency. But what is demanded from the man is that he needs to sometimes sacrifice some of his manliness, some of his manhood, and lower himself to the level of a woman sometimes. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the best person to ever set foot on the face of the earth, and the most pious and obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than anyone. And this never decreased his status at all. When one day he told his companions, he was walking with his companions and walking with his wife Aisha, he told the rest of the Sahaba, he says, walk ahead of us. And he told Aisha, he said, come here Aisha, let's race. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, in the narration, she said, I raced the Messenger of Allah and I beat him. Then when I gained more weight, we raced on another occasion. And he told his companions to walk in front of us, so we raced again. This time we raced and he ended up beating me. And then we started to laugh. And he said, this victory is for the victory that you beat me in previously. And racing his wife, playing with his wife, this didn't decrease the Prophet Muhammad's status at all. Rather, it only increased it and increased the love that his wife had for him. So if you are thinking of raising the status or level of your wife so that she is like you, so that there are, maybe somebody thinks, they want your wife to be the same level as you, then it would be similar to having two men in the house. And this will never be correct or acceptable. Because as many men know that they cannot live with another man in the same house. And a woman, even if she is extremely serious and her manners are those resembling men, you won't be able to live with her either. So the man of the house must lower himself sometimes to the level of a woman, and this is called mudara. For example, a man whose wife very rarely is pleased or satisfied with anything that the husband does. With anything that her husband does, she always says he doesn't understand, he's dumb, he's stupid, and everyone deceives him, everybody laughs at him. So, for example, one day, let's say he goes out to buy some shoes, and the salesperson really gave him a good deal. So his wife may ask him, how much did you buy them for? So he responds, $40. Then she says, he got over on you. If I bought them, I could have got them for $20. So she makes him dislike even the fact that he bought her something. Instead of saying, may Allah bless you for this wonderful gift, may Allah reward you, may Allah increase you in goodness, we always tire you out. Even if she didn't really mean it, she doesn't lose anything for saying it. So if the man goes out and buys something for his wife and knows that this is how his wife acts, then he should just tell her, this is a gift, so that he doesn't have to hear the words like this, like, oh, if I went out, I could have bought it for $20 and they got over on you, you bought it for $40. So he should just tell his wife that this is a gift. So the man, he must use what? He must use wisdom and mudara. He must use mudara. He must appease to his wife, placate his wife by flattering her and using good words to maintain good relations and not to engage in argument. And this is from the good, this is from the wise, intelligent manners of a Muslim. The Prophet Muhammad would use this as well. As Aisha radiallahu anha, she narrated in an authentic hadith as it came in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, where she said, قالت استأذن رجل على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنا عنده فقال بئس الابن العشيرة أو أخو العشيرة ثم أذن له فألان له القول فلما خرج قلت له يا رسول الله قلت له ما قلت ثم ألنت له القول فقال يا عائشة إن من شر الناس من تركه الناس أو وضعه الناس اتقاء فحشي. So Aisha, on one occasion, she said that a man sought permission to enter upon the Prophet Muhammad in the house while Aisha was with him. So he said, the Prophet Muhammad said, he said, what an evil man this is. What a bad man this is. Then he allowed the man to come in, and then the Prophet Muhammad spoke with him. And when the man left, Aisha said to the Prophet Muhammad, O Messenger of Allah, you said what you said about him, that he was an evil man. But then you talked politely with him. then you talk with him with respect. So the Prophet Muhammad responded, he said, O Aisha, indeed amongst the evilest of people are those whom the people avoid, or who the people leave, fearing his filthy speech. So this hadith shows us right here, this is the foundation for al-mudara, for placating and flattering. That just because you may think somebody is evil or think somebody is a bad person, or you know that somebody is a bad person, you should still talk and deal with that person in a respectable manner. So this woman, okay, this fifth woman who described her husband, she described her husband as what? As a leopard. When he enters the house, he's a leopard, okay? And then she said when he goes outside, he is like a lion. So she described him as someone who, when at home, okay, intentionally ignores things, but when he leaves the house, he's one who socializes and mixes with the people and is highly respected. So another thing that we benefit from this hadith is that when she said, وَلَا يَسْأَلُ عَمَّ أَحَدٍ, that and don't ask about, don't ask about what happens in the house. So another benefit that we can learn from this is that the husband should not ask his wife about every single thing that goes on. Okay, he shouldn't ask his wife, well, I bought some bananas, where are they? Or I gave you $50, what did you do with it? Some husbands are so stingy that they even count the pieces of chicken that they bought from the supermarket, or they count how many pieces of meat. And if they find that there's one piece of chicken missing or one piece of meat, right, the wife may say, well, the cat ate it. Then he goes and weighs the cat. And this is not how a husband should act. Rather, he should be generous. He should be gracious, right? Maybe she gave some meat to her friends or family or for charity. Do not embarrass your wives, brothers. Do not embarrass the mother of your children. Rather, be generous with your wife. Okay? So the fifth woman, she said this about her husband because he doesn't ask her about what happens in the house or what she does with the things in the house. So the fifth woman, she's actually praising her husband in a great manner. So until our next lecture, we will we'll talk about, inshallah, in our next lecture, we'll talk about the sixth woman, her narrative, and what she described her husband as. And until next time, Jazakallah khair wa barakallahu feek for joining us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.